2026 State of the Community. I am St. Louis Park Mayor Nadia Mohamed, and I'm actually inviting City Manager Kim Keller, and we're gonna just have a conversation. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this. So one of the things I want to set up for people is give a roadmap to some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Obviously, we're going to talk about Operation Metro Surge, because how can you not, right? And then we're going to talk about our new strategic priority, which is going to be the big thing that we've done the past couple of year or so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before we launch into that, I think it might be helpful just to talk for a minute about how our local government works. Actually, I was talking to someone in the audience about this who had some questions as well.
Yeah.
Because local government can feel a little mysterious sometimes.
Yeah. So the essence of, in our government right now, the way that we do our governance, power is shared.
Yeah, we really operate differently than Minneapolis or St. Paul does.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the role of the council and the mayor?
Yeah. So clear up the mystery behind that. You can see the lovely council right there, all beautiful smiles. So the council really, what they do is they set the direction for the city. We represent the community, we establish priorities, adopt policies, and then we make the long-term decisions for where the city is heading. And then, that means, a lot of listening, a lot of boards and commission meetings, public hearings, really just doing a lot of these like listening sessions for folks, public hearings, all that. And then especially as mayor, I also get to lead the council, facilitate council meetings. I get to be the public face of the city. So whenever people think about St. Louis Park, they think about me. Kidding. But it's just like that's kind of where I get to do the work. My vote counts as much as any other council member. I work alongside my colleagues with that. So it's great. What about you? What does the operational side look like?
Yes, so then my role is to take all that direction that the council provides and turn it into operations. I oversee about 300 full-time staff and 100 part-time, more than 100 part-time over 8 departments.
That's a really important piece because once council sets the direction, you guys get to do like the unseen, behind the scenes kind of day-to-day work.
We do, both unseen and then the very visible stuff too, right? So whether it's elections or snow plowing or your emergency services, inspections, it's city staff who are making that happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you for setting the kind of like getting that idea with us and setting the stage on what our roles are. I think it can be a little bit mysterious. Now moving on to what a lot of you guys have actually shared with me is around Metro Surge. I know that a lot of our residents have really felt this both emotionally and like at times maybe even physically and personally, deeply personal to many of us. And so like, I'm curious to see what was that the defining moments or the defining thing of this year? It was challenging, let's just say.
Sure. It was certainly the most visible, the most emotional, and the most complex challenge I think that we all faced during this last year. It is important to point out that even before Operation Metro Surge, we as an organization were navigating changes and challenges from a change in public or the federal administration.
What type of changes?
There were more audits, more uncertainty around grants and reimbursements, funding sources we'd planned to apply for that weren't available to us. So a lot of staff time kind of shifting into compliance work and toward risk management. So there's always some adjustment whenever there's a new federal administration. We're used to navigating that, but I would say the scope and the pace of it was different this time around.
Yeah. I mean, what I hear you saying is that even before Operation Metro Surge became so public, that staff was doing some of the behind the scenes work, and there's like some stressors there.
Yeah, exactly. As you led the council and helped all of us navigate this time along with community, what were you focused on?
I think one of the things I was mainly focused on, it was really important to me and to the rest of the council that the city services and city resources was available to people who were mostly impacted, who was most directly impacted, right? To us at the time, it looked like different things, but providing funding for STEP around food assistance, rental assistance, holding public comment periods, really being in community and listening to folks. That was really important to us at the time. And then I know that, as I'm thinking about, the first couple of days or whatnot, I also know that staff was doing a lot of the navigating with residents, getting them to resources and services. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So we stood up a network of trusted messengers, of community members who have relationships, deep relationships within the community. We made sure that the resources and the accurate information that we had got to those trusted messengers who then could help get the information out to those who were most directly impacted. That was a big lift and a really important thing, I think, that we did, and that we will continue to use that list. We also spent a lot of time with our attorney and with the police department to, as you can imagine, to understand our legal lane. And then I can't count the number of conversations that I had with other municipal leaders around the state, around what they were doing, what actions they were taking, and what I could think about bringing back home here.
Yeah.
During that time, the council needed to make some really difficult decisions publicly and under a lot of scrutiny. What grounded you?
I think it sounds very cliche to say this, but definitely the people. As you look back to the first couple of months and what was going on, we saw a lot of people show up for each other, show love for each other, support each other. And I think that really just gave me clarity on who we're fighting for, right? And why it was important for us to really focus on the role of local government and how effective that can be. We're focused on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we really couldn't fix every aspect of what was happening nationally, but we could focus on stability, on safety, and supporting the community when it was needed. And so that was something that really got us through, and really be effective in our response. And I'm really happy about that, yeah.
Was there pressure to move outside that role?
Of course. I mean, pressure was all around. I think, one of the things that I do appreciate, again, there's a lot of appreciation you'll hear from me, right? A lot of gratitude for how aligned staff, council, and I were on our responsibilities, on the values, on the things that we were supposed to be doing and are meant to be doing, right? And so that's kind of like what alleviated a little bit of the pressure. And then on a personal end, being a Somali mayor at a time when Somali communities were under attack, it was especially, there's a lot of pressure for me to react and respond a certain way or say certain things. And I found myself very quickly where I couldn't respond to things the same way that my colleagues could, right, from other cities. And so that's when something happened regionally that was really helpful, in fact.
The coalition.
Yes. So the coalition, which is Cities for Safe and Stable Communities.
Started really small.
Very small, just a couple of mayors who got together trying to figure out how can they support each other, how can they advocate for each other. And
we're over 30 cities strong now.
1,000%, and it is one of the most effective ways that we have really tried to fight back in the region.
Yeah. What do you think makes it work?
I think the fact that we were intentionally nonpartisan, right? I think that's one of the things that made it really impactful, and we were able to carve ourselves a third lane that focused on and agreed on civil liberties, de-escalation, and the economic vibrancy of our communities, and that really made us effective and to stay in role of local government. I will say we went to go testify in federal legislators, and of the four that we were fighting for, 2 passed, which is around food relief and rental assistance, which is amazing. But if you know anything about us, the fight never stops. So we're going to go back next year to ask for municipal aid as well as small business relief for all the other things that we have incurred over the past couple of months. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you? What's actually, instead of, I think one of the things we can acknowledge is with Operation Metro Surge really took up a lot of our time, a lot of our energy, a lot of our emotions and whatnot. But it wasn't the only thing that was happening here in the city, right? So we're going to transition as smoothly as possible to the next item, which is around our strategic priority. And so this is where the city is really focused on the Vision 4.0.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, so just on that, I've been telling staff that Operation Metro Surge is what we respond to.
Yeah.
This is what we're choosing.
Yes.
As our priorities.
Yes.
So every 10 years, the city asks a really simple and a very fundamental question. What kind of community do we want to be? This was the biggest engagement that we have done. We had more than 1,600 residents participate, which is fantastic. They participated in pop-up events and surveys, hosted conversations in their homes. Importantly, we really work to hear from folks who don't always show up in these kinds of engagements. So think about like renters and youth and people of color. And residents definitely talked about the future and what they're looking for. They also talked about what they value and what they want to make sure they protect.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about what you heard?
I think what struck me is that decade after decade, they stick to the fundamentals of what is important to Signals Park, right? I think even though that it feels very different every 10 years, the residents really are consistent and continuously talk about a city that feels welcoming, well-run, connected, safe, and forward-thinking. That's something that they always come back to.
And so all that input then helped shape the final 5 priorities that council adopted.
Yes.
Should we walk through them?
1,000%.
All right. We have a welcoming, safe community,
We have good governance,
connected, safe infrastructure,
diverse and affordable, dignified housing.
and climate leadership and natural spaces.
Yeah, I should have memorized all 5 of them by now.
We have 10 years for you to work on it.
Yes, yes, we do.
So when the council talks about a welcoming, safe community, what does that actually mean in practice?
I think, when people talk about this, it means that they both want to feel physically safe and feel like they belong here, right? And so consistently people talk about wanting strong neighborhoods, responsive public safety services, a community where people really, from different backgrounds, really feel like they belong here, that they can call this place home, right? And that's something that people really value and want to feel included. Yeah, what about you?
Well, and we saw this during Operation Metro Surge also.
Yes,
right?
yes. Where people were mostly really feeling like they want to show up for their neighbors and they want the neighbors to feel included and inclusive, or I should say inclusive of their neighbors.
Yeah, and so we saw it like in terms of organizations like STEP, but also like our PTO groups.
I can't believe I actually forgot the PTO. No.
Don't forget the PTOs.
The Signals Park PTO really did a wonderful job with the turnout, and they showed up and they showed out for their families, for their students. So much so we actually gave them an award, a human rights award. So if you do see a PTO person, give them a big thank you for the work that they have done. And we awarded them with the human rights award just to acknowledge the humongous work that they have been doing during these uncertain times.
I think that recognition really resonated with people because it matched what they were seeing on the ground. It felt really authentic.
Yeah. And I think even beyond Operation Metro Surge, people really want something there. When they look at emergency services, they want to make sure that it is with care, it is with compassion, that it is appropriate to the response that they're looking for, right? And so that's something that I really come to appreciate.
Yeah, and you're right. It goes beyond, right? It started before, and it goes beyond.
Yeah.
So our police department, our fire department, our community development staff have really leaned into partnership and innovation around emergency response. Our behavioral health unit in the police department is strong. We also have an alternative response medic program in our fire department to be able to help people be able to stay in their homes and address the health needs that they have. So this collaboration, especially between the two of those units, is receiving attention regionally. Because communities everywhere are trying to figure out how do they respond to these challenges, whether behavioral health, chemical, or mental health.
And we love to see our departments working together differently. That's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, just last week we received a thank you from a family whose adult child was helped by the behavioral health unit, and there's so much planning around a conference table that happens for all of that work, and so to see it being meaningfully received was just it's very touching.
Note to folks, we do like our thank you cards. We do like the thank yous. Moving on to good governance, this can sound a little abstract. Tell me a little bit about what is organizationally, operationally, what does that look like? What does good governance look like?
To me, it looks like trust and consistency. Residents should be able to understand how decisions are made, how money is spent, what we're prioritizing.
And transparency is a huge part of that.
Yes, absolutely. And not just after the decisions are made, but throughout the process.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you've made around, what folks are really hoping for in terms of transparency. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the big things that are coming up with this?
She's prompting me here.
I am.
So we have an online budget book that we've launched this year. Budget documents can be intimidating, and this is a tool that gives you the opportunity to go in, see the entire city budget, and then be also able to click into different departments and see where are taxpayer dollars being spent, and also what are you getting from them, what are the accomplishments.
I am really excited about that. I think budgeting is one of those things that unless you're in government or you're in finance, it's really hard to have access to it, and people really care about that. What was that one saying with the money in the mouth or something?
Put your money where your mouth is.
That's exactly what it is. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. That's part of our relationship is that she finishes those types of sayings for me.
You do really well with them.
Yeah.
So budgeting is where priorities become real.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Mayor, how does council think about balancing community expectations around services, which we all love, really high quality services,
Yes.
and affordability?
Very carefully. Very, very carefully. I think residents really have come to expect St. Louis Park to provide excellent services, and they want affordable, right? They want to be able to stay in their cities and be able to experience these services, and they want good infrastructure as well, right? And so every conversation, every budget conversation that we're having, it's a balancing act between the service levels, the long-term investments, and the taxpayer impact. And we take that job very seriously. It's the most important job that we have in the budget.
It can be really easy to view each budget decision as a standalone item, but they are so interconnected. So like infrastructure now affects future costs, right? Staffing affects service levels. If we delay maintenance, there's going to be something down the road that we're going to have to pay for.
Yeah. And I think every elected official here in this room can agree when I say sometimes the most responsible financial decision you can make might not be the most popular one, and it most definitely will not be the most politically easy one.
Yeah.
And so it gets really hard with that.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on the staff side. That's very true. So as staff, we're working right now on our 2027 budget recommendations for council.
Yeah.
The first big discussion the council will have on this is in August. We hope everyone tunes in.
Okay, give us a little preview. What do you think is kind of like, what is the biggest pressures that may be facing local governments financially?
It's rising costs everywhere, whether it's construction, insurance, labor, technology. Costs have increased significantly over the past several years. They never went down after COVID.
Yeah.
And we understand that people are experiencing that in their personal lives as well.
Yeah.
So, same time, we all expect really high quality services. Residents expect it, and staff want to deliver on it.
As they should. One of the things, actually, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that within that, they should, and within that comes long-range planning.
Okay, it's funny you say that, because I was thinking, when we hear things like capital planning, asset management, people tend to tune out. Because I lost track of what you were saying as you were saying as well. But tell me, what does that mean? Tell us.
Oh, that's fair.
What does that mean?
That's fair. So when we say things like capital planning and asset management, really what we mean is making sure that our roads and our utilities, the facilities that we all enjoy, are maintained responsibly over time instead of waiting for a crisis.
Yeah.
So while a lot of the staff work that you see out there in community is really visible, you see our yellow trucks around, we also we spend a lot of time thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the line, or even further.
Yeah. People don't usually notice that unless something goes wrong.
That's very true. Good governance, effective governance, right, is often invisible.
Yeah. Speaking of invisible things, actually a question that was asked as well around elections. I know we do a lot of election preparedness, and it's a huge responsibility that local governments have, right? So what does that work look like, and why do you think it goes underappreciated?
Well, I think it's similar to infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
You're right. It's a tremendous amount of work. We spend months preparing. Can't say enough good things about our election workers, our gratitude for them. But just like infrastructure, when things go well, the operational complexity gets hidden.
Yeah.
We rely heavily on our partners at the state and the county. We don't keep voter rolls, for instance, right? Others do that. But it is city staff and city election workers who are on the ground making sure that everyone's elections run well.
And they take that job very seriously, I think, only Magna.
They really do.
Yeah.
They really do.
Speaking of infrastructure, next up is infrastructure. So speaking of things that people do actually notice, they notice when the roads are ripped up, right? I get nonstop emails and calls.
Very true. Very
true. So let's talk about that.
And I feel like infrastructure projects come with a paradox. Like if we're doing our jobs well long term, there is short term discomfort.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one project that people are feeling the most, what would it be?
The one that got them here. You're welcome. The one that takes me home as well, it has to be the 3-year Cedar Lake Road and Louisiana Avenue reconstruction. We're going up to it's in our final phase right now on this project to improve roads, utility, accessibility, transportation. It don't look like it right now, but it will be beautiful when it's done.
It will. We've already seen how transformative phase 1 and phase 2
Yeah.
are. Just, look at all the people who are using the new trails.
Yeah. I would say, can you tell me a little bit about, so we know that when these constructions are happening, it can take a toll on residents, but most importantly, not that residents are not important, but it can also take a toll on our small businesses. What does the support look like from staff?
Yeah, absolutely. So both engineering and community development staff stay in close connection with all of our small businesses during a construction project, before, during, and after, helping connect them with resources and then problem solve as things come up.
Yeah, I will say, I have heard, speaking of thank yous, I have heard good things after the fact that, we know that small businesses are an integral part of what makes St. Louis Park, right, and its character. And I've heard a lot of folks, a lot of residents, a lot of small businesses who have said that they've had a really wonderful working relationship with staff during, after, before, which is high praise, honestly. And so,
That's so good to
yeah,
hear. That's so good to hear.
Yeah.
We really want businesses not just to survive the
Yeah.
construction, but to be able to take advantage of the major investment that's right outside their doors.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's always good to get thank yous, you guys. Another thing.
Second plug.
Yes.
All right, should we talk about housing?
Yeah.
Because housing was another issue that residents consistently raised throughout the Vision 4.0 process. What do you think residents were really asking for in those conversations?
Flexibility, affordability, and stability. I think people really talked about wanting to stay in St. Louis Park and having the option to stay in St. Louis Park throughout the different stages of their lives, as well as the different income levels.
I think it's a really important point because oftentimes when we talk about housing, people assume we're talking about growth and development. But residents in St. Louis Park were also talking about staying connected to community.
Yes, 1,000%. I think people want, not I think, but definitely people want their kids to live here someday. They want the older adults to be able to live in St. Louis Park and to downsize when they feel it's the right time, right? They want workforce housing. They want neighbors and families to have options, which is very clear in the vision as well.
And this has been accompanied by some really important policy work the council's been doing this last year.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about the zoning changes?
Now you're setting me up for good stuff because the council has recently adopted the first major update for the city's residential zoning district since 1992. Yeah. So the changes, that was a wow moment, you guys. I intentionally paused for you guys. The changes obviously creates more flexibility in housing types for folks and additional and more attainable housing options, which is amazing.
Why was it important to do this now?
I mean, come on, it's 1992. I wasn't even born then. That was another haha moment, you guys. But the city has changed a lot, right, since 1992. Housing needs have changed, household sizes changed, market pressures have changed. So of course, if the city wants a wide range of housing, of course, the zoning should also evolve as well. So that's been a really big part of the housing updates.
Yes, that's one really important part of the work. The city also continues supporting programs for home ownership, for rental assistance, remodeling, and others that can help folks be able to stay here.
Can you tell me why why do you think the financial aspect of this, or I mean, why do you think it's important outside of the financial aspect of this?
I think it's around stability.
Yeah.
Housing instability affects us at all levels, right? Your mental health, your transportation, your schooling, your employment opportunities. And so every aspect of an individual's well-being and ultimately a community's well-being comes down to, are you stable in your home?
Yeah. I would definitely agree with this. And I think as somebody who grew up in public housing, stability absolutely matters. So another great example of this, honestly, is while we're talking about this, the green line extension, I should say. Should know this by now. But opens the riders next year, which is great. Another applause moment, because it was a long time coming. Thank you. So nearly $500 million has been tied to this development, including housing, retail, trail connection, station area development. I'm really excited to ride that bus.
That train?
The train.
It is.
Yes.
Get online.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it is a great example. You know, housing conversations are rarely simple
Yes.
because people care deeply about their neighborhoods and affordability at the same time.
Yeah.
How does council navigate that balance?
I think there's a lot of listening, right? It's focusing on the long-term, like, you know, I say long-term is the key here, right? Long-term community needs instead of reacting to individual projects in isolation, right? And so ultimately, people will tell us year after year, decade after year, decade after decade, that they want to remain in this community and have a wide range of options so that people can live and thrive here. And so that's what we keep coming back to, and that's what makes it easier. Yeah. Okay, last but not least, because I know people are getting a little angsty, kidding, climate leadership. So this is another thing that keeps coming back, again, decade after decade, because people really care about climate leadership. So where do we see most of this progress happening?
Well, we're definitely seeing measurable progress in greenhouse gas emissions. Since adopting a climate action plan, citywide, we've seen a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
That's big progress. What drives it?
Well, it's a combination of things, right? So we have our community energy programs, we have sustainability initiatives, the redevelopment standards that council has put in place. There's private sector improvements, of course, and then I think that's all we're doing locally. We should also, I should point out that the electrical grid has gotten a lot cleaner, and so what that signifies to me is that the progress is depending on all of us making these investments. It's not something we can do alone.
Yeah. I think one of the great examples of that collaboration and partnership is Terraza, which is over at West End. Recently, we did a ribbon cutting over there, and it's a mixed income, housing that has incorporated sustainability goals. It's also good to note that it is the first building built here in St. Louis Park that with the newly updated green building policy, which is a really good way to just kind of incorporate many of these things in that one building. Yeah.
Mayor, why do you think that residents in St. Louis Park care so deeply about environmental issues and natural spaces? Easy. Because of the parks, the trails, and the open spaces. Like, have you guys ever walked on a street and you see tree canopies, you could breathe better, there's shade, it's beautiful, right? And so people really appreciate being able to be connected to nature and it being part of their day-to-day life. Yeah, they're really heavily used too, right? Think about like this facility, all of our parks, regional connections as well.
And it's really important that we do it as we're developing and as we're growing, right? Which is really amazing. And I really appreciate, I think one thing I also appreciate about the climate leadership is that it's not just one big project, right? It is small decisions that are made to just add up to overtime, Yeah, really amazing.
Mayor, before we wrap up, what is giving you optimism right now?
Keep coming back to this, but the people. I know it sounds corny and cliche, but genuinely, I wouldn't have survived this year. And I know many of us wouldn't have gone through this year were it not for people who constantly showed up, showed out, our organizations, community members, staff who've done a wonderful job in really making sure we get through this year and really support each other and support one another, which is really amazing. What about you?
I'd say something really similar. I think this year reminded me that community isn't something that we talk about, it's something that we practice, especially during the hard moments. Oh yeah, love them. I'm really grateful for the trust that the St. Louis Park community has with us in all of our city buildings, and I'm so incredibly proud of the work that city staff do and how they show up and have shown up under really challenging circumstances.
Yeah. I think I would double down on the partnerships, and I think one of the things I definitely appreciate is the partnership that we have in doing this work. I could not have asked for a better partner in this work. So shout out to Kim Keller, who's been wonderful in leading this city throughout this and every other year before and after, right? I also want to give thank you. I'm going to go a little bit off script, but not too much. I also want to thank my council members. I said this, like, this is something that was deeply personal to me. What has been happening this year, and it's my first time being mayor, y'all, right? And I'm trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening, but I could not have asked for a better council to serve alongside with. And I say that as I'm looking at Jake Spano, who's former mayor. But anyways, thank you, council, who showed up and showed out, and every other person who's here with us today. I think one of the people, it's really easy to get disengaged in these really hard times, and people have stayed engaged throughout this entire process, and again, could not have asked for a better village. So, yeah. As we're wrapping up, or I should say, this is a wrap up, before we go, I want to make sure that you guys know some really cool events are happening all around the city. The aquatic park is opening tomorrow, June 3rd, so go there, go for a swim, bring the kids. Juneteenth activities is also happening, fire department open house, as well as Parktacular.
Yeah, June's going to be a really busy month.
Yes.
Please don't forget also the rest of the summer. We've got fireworks on the 3rd of July and National Night Out on August 4th.
Yes, yes, and if you're looking for more fun activities, please look up the city website. There's tons more available. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for practicing your civic engagement. Thank you for learning about what we do here. I'm really excited to move forward with this. I'm really excited to do this with all of you guys. We're grateful for the work that you guys all do, so thank you.